Hi everyone, so my name's Nygilia, aka Fantasy Future Gal in the NFT space. I like to do mixed media art with virtual reality and tapping into illustration and photography. That's something that's really important to me, not just as an artist, but as a storyteller. You know, coming from an Afro-Caribbean background and family from Europe, I love tapping into different cultures and being able to expand upon those horizons. So a bit about me, like I said, mixed media artist. I'm actually from Albany, New York, so I'm about like 2 hours north from here, but currently based in England, pursuing my passions in virtual reality through a PhD, but also working alongside projects and different companies. I have over 100 NFTs sold through this marketplace, you know, building from last year since March 2021, and really like being consistent with you know, how I create art, but also using the technologies and ways of textures to create perspective in my work. And another fun fact is I'm a basketball player before I became an artist. So what is virtual reality? I like to refer to it as the tool of empathy. Many people in different companies have called it that. And it's almost a way where, you know, you put on the headset, this like little vehicle, I would say, on your head, and it brings you into a new space in a new form of time. What I love about virtual reality is it erases your sense of place, and in your mind, you have to create your own. So what was great about being getting the opportunity to go to England was actually I didn't even have the money to have my own headset and everything else. The person I lived with in my accommodation actually had a headset and a PC computer, and he never used it. And luckily, him and I were friends. And so I asked him, oh, can I use the headset and try something out? So I did that, made like this like 1 minute experimental and showed it to my peers. And my tutor was like, yeah, you're doing a film. So this is actually a snippet from a VR like 2D featured film I did for the final project for my class. And as a result, you know, tapping into this like unknown realm, adding animation, adding these different textures and filming in the headset, my greatest accomplishment out of that got me to be British Animation Awards for Best Immersive. I was shortlisted for that whole feature, and that only happens twice a year. I mean, every 2 years. So like with me, like I felt like virtual reality ended up being my calling, not just because I was understanding the technology, it was because I understood why it matters in this space. So Afro-Fantasy, the art of experimentation. For a while, a lot of people have heard Afrofuturism, thanks to Black Panther and a lot of authors in the space. And for me, like after speaking to a couple artists, they realized you're not really like Afrofuturism, you're kind of a fantasy element to it. So I was like, oh, we'll call it Afro-Fantasy. I think that's like a cool term, and it makes sense for me because as an artist, a lot of my art derives from like not just African, but I'm really inspired by a lot of Asian culture, storytelling from like Studio Ghibli, RPG games like Final Fantasy and Legend of Zelda is something that's really passionate to me because of how the characters come from different cultures and backgrounds, but they come together for a greater purpose. So, you know, pursuing VR more and again, kind of experimenting with how you texture things, you create unique worlds and different ideas and ways of thinking in a space. And through the NFT space, I've actually met a lot of musicians, and one in particular, Finestra, which I collaborated with on a project that we called Astro Dreams, where we wanted to combine our roots of the Caribbean and bring this kind of new experimental growth of VR and 3D music. And so this is like one of the scenes that's actually going to be as part of Portia Nap and their immersive gallery this Friday. And you know, it's amazing kind of what you can do with VR and not have it be so direct, but sometimes I love to have people look at something and get an emotional reaction. It doesn't have to be, you know, I think of this story and it has to be what other people think. You know, I've had like pieces where I've made art and it all of a sudden like triggers like a childhood memory. And that's something that I feel special about because it wasn't my aim, but I love that my art taps into people in that way. So NFTs plus VR plus storytelling. You know, as I have moving pieces, I also have stills. And I love to like use VR in photography too. and kind of collage it and combine it, as you can see in the far right corner. Actually, in the far right, that was like one of my early on pieces, and that was like recognized by OpenSea. It's how I got to meet one of my first collectors, and it kind of felt like I was kind of discovering this new way of texturing into posthumanism and using VR as some form of like color layering. And I thought it was quite inspiring, considering, you know, what I was already doing in VR, and you know, then I realized, even if you play with this like vehicle in your head, right? You don't necessarily always have to make a moving image. I think when you use virtual reality, it actually opens up your senses and understanding the stuff you make. So because you're floating in gravity in the headset, it doesn't necessarily like hold you back. You actually learn to understand space. You learn to understand color treatment. You learn to understand like the kind of work you want to make. And so I think that's what's really powerful about virtual reality. It doesn't have to be just virtual. It actually expands your growth of knowledge. So the future of creativity, for me personally, I'm really much a person that wants to keep growing in this space, to keep kind of tapping into all these different elements of not just fantasy and future, but also combining those worlds together to tell really unique and powerful stories. And you know, now that I've grown as an artist for a year now, and you know, wanting to form partnerships and meet new people, you know, it's not just about me. You know, I want to keep growing what virtual reality can bring to the table, and not just for artists in the space, but also to see more women come in as well. It's still a very male-dominated field, and you know, to see more women artists tap into VR, I think is very important, because then we establish those stories that much further. And you know, again, being like a mixed race artist, I love seeing, you know, Black people all around the world have a story. You know, it's not just Africa, it's bigger than that. There's Africans in Germany, there's Africans in South America, like there's different types of people, and to have them all be in this space would not only push the NFT space further, but I think allow us to have more empathy for all of us in the future. So thank you guys.